There we go. Hello, everyone. We are live. Hopefully the sound is working. That would be pretty cool if it was. It should be. I think I have everything the way that it needs to be to make it all come through. I saw some levels from you guys. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Absolute Tabletop Pool Party. I am your host. I don't know why I started to launch into like some untapped synapse that hasn't been tapped in a long time, where I was suddenly introducing something. But it's been a while, to say the least. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, and Tim, you may be able to speak to this more now. I don't know how much you watched. But I wanted to start by talking a little bit about Rick and Morty, the TV show. Kiel, as far as I know, you are a fan. Tim, it sounds like you're watching it a little bit.
Yes, so can I just say that I have not seen beyond season 2 in memory, and I'm rewatching it. I was watching it before this stream.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So I'm hyper fresh on season 1 and 2, but I just don't want... I'm throwing that out there for the chat and for the two of you, in case that there are any spoilers. Don't assume that I know them.
Okay. I love the way you worded that. Spoilers are fine, but just don't assume that I know them.
Right. I'm afraid people can't hear us, but I'm as far as I know, everything should be coming through. Are people not hearing us? That would be bad. I don't have the YouTube open.
I will.
I hear us. No, okay.
Asking,
yeah, no, I hear us. I think so.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Actually,
at the very beginning, maybe. Oh man, she's just. I'm afraid.
Looks like
she's saying. Looks like.
No, I think we are still muted.
So James, OBS
very beginning maybe
does this thing where it will take your sources away from you.
Yeah, but if I unmute the YouTube video, I hear me.
Oh. Yeah, no, so we must be good. Okay.
Maybe
cool.
I'm muted soon. Oh, okay. Okay, Cole, you got me. You got me. We knew it. I'm so afraid of that I was like, I'm sorry, guys. We have to stop and make sure that it's not muted. And that, oh, gosh. So that's okay. Oh, that is so good. Oh, that's amazing. Well, okay, we pretended we had technical difficulties until everybody joined in. Cole, I'm so happy to have you here. I wouldn't have it any other way. Trust me.
It's the staller.
Yes. But but I wanted to talk about Rick and Morty because, in a sense, I wanted to explore and show people that there are a lot of things that you can sort of hone in on when you're talking about why you do or don't like something, and I think that's important because I used to be a person that would point at something and say this is good or this is bad, and I have so much learned that you're just not allowed to say that. Because the thing that I think is the most worst, cliched, ridiculous, stupid thing is something that somebody loves and it's their favorite, right? And it's just to know that exists. But what we can do is we can still talk about the things we consume. But there's like this cloud around you if you say you like Rick and Morty, especially if you say you love Rick and Morty. And I don't want to have the Linus cloud of Rick and Morty around me. But so what I want to do is I want to talk about, there are plenty of things about the show that I don't like, but there are some things that the show does that you don't get anywhere. And the thesis of kind of the whole theory is it's the nexus of concept and implementation. Rick and Morty is perfect for me because I love crazy sci-fi stuff. If you don't love crazy sci-fi stuff, you probably won't enjoy it. There is a separate aspect where narratively they do really fun things. There's some really interesting meta stuff that happens. You're sort of constantly, you never know what world you're in, and that's part of the fun, is the idea that you never know like which version of the characters you're looking at. There's like this whole extra layer happening. But if you're not in for sort of what another show I watch, Solar Opposites, calls sci-fi BS, but of course they say it's a Hulu show, then you're just not going to enjoy it, you know? So that's the important thing, is somebody that doesn't like sci-fi stuff can still look at something like Rick and Morty, and we can talk about what we appreciate about it and what we can still sort of be critical about what we don't like. I wanted to start talking about the show and then sort of move on to, well, what does that mean about what we create, if that makes sense, right? Knowing these things are separate, we put different things into our concept and different things into our implementation, and sometimes leaving one aside or the other is very important. You know, you can have a conversation about concept, but you have to be on the same page that you're doing that. Because if somebody's too worried about implementation details, right, this is like forever my problem. Tim's trying to tell me a cool idea, and I'm going, well, how are you going to And it's like, no, we're going to do that later. All problems are solvable. We're having this conversation knowing that it doesn't matter, right? So, Tim, what episode of Rick and Morty were you watching?
It's called The Ricks Must Be Crazy.
Okay, I'm going to look it up because I want to see which one it is.
Essentially, his car battery has a universe inside of it.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, of course. I know that. I don't know the
you know
names of them, but I know exactly.
I don't either. I just happened to literally watch
so
that,
funny.
turn it off, and walk in here.
So that's so good.
Like, I was just watching it, and when I exited out of the HBO Max screen, it was on the screen. So it was very... I don't know the names of them either. That did sound kind of impressive, though, right? I should have really played that up. Oh yeah, I'm not a super fan.
Oh well, no, it was just funny because I guess what that is to say is with Rick and Morty, it's like the episodes kind of have a thing about them, so it's like it's so interesting because it immediately when I saw it I was like, oh, that one, and that's something to be said. Yeah.
So the thing about I think Family Guy and Rick and Morty is that the showrunners and creators are huge fanboys themselves, and at every opportunity put their fandom into their stuff. And so this is a play off of a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. That is one thing about Rick and Morty. So what I wanted to touch on real quick, I don't think for me, and I can't speak for everyone, I don't think the fact that it's sci-fi is what's polarizing about that show.
So I agree that that's not what's polarizing. What I mean to say is, if you don't like sci-fi, all the rest comes with that. You know what I mean? If you're not here for the vehicle, you're not going to enjoy the trappings. That's all I mean to say. But absolutely, I agree, yeah.
Because Rick and Morty is the intersection between lowbrow and brilliant. It is the strangest mix of hyper sharp, really intelligent writing, shock factor, and pee-pee poo-poo jokes.
Yeah, that's a great way.
But that's what's interesting. So to me, what that says is this world is still normal, even though there's sci-fi. It's almost grounding because they're on an alien planet and it's a poop joke. Some people hate that about the show, and I get that. Some parts of the show like that I don't like, where I'm like, oh, they kind of have to do this type of joke here, or this scene doesn't work, I don't agree with it, but that's what they did. I appreciate their, their ministry.
I'll also say one other thing, and this is, it can be very polarizing. It doesn't pull punches in terms of emotional things either. So in the mix of all of that, they will hit you between the eyes with a moral conundrum that's presented humorously, but is like, or something will happen that just has ramifications that just hit you, and they'll sneak it in. Sometimes the after episode chaser will be something and you're like, oh yeah, like, oh, zing. So that's the other thing.
And it's so funny to hear that from you who hasn't seen it all. Yeah.
If you're not in for that, you're like, oh.
Yes, it is the tonally. So Kiel, do you have a favorite episode? I don't, so that's an unfair question.
No,
I just wanted to see.
I do have some favorites, but that would probably be one of them actually. But I don't know. I've actually, it's one of those shows that my wife and I just like rewatch the whole, whatever, 5 or 6 seasons, like
now season 5
pretty regularly, So I also
absolutely
don't necessarily know the episodes by name, but same. When it was like the one with the car battery, I was like, and I saw that like with a couple of weeks ago, so
exactly, right,
fresh for me too, so but no, that's some really great points there where you're talking about the intersections of the different things there, like the pee-pee poo-poo jokes and the just brilliant, the fast, quick-fire dialogue, and like even they're like intertwined. Like Rick's dialogue is laced with burps, like he can't get a freaking sentence out because he's like Morty. So it's like it's in the fabric of the show and the characters, right? Like that. They're not sort of separate or afterthoughts. I think that's very intentional. That split that you were talking about there. And with some, I'm not sure if you've seen any of the really sort of heavy hitting episodes. There's a few that I can think of where, like at the end, because as you say, there's, as part of the many episodes, and it just gets more and more sort of wacky as the seasons go on, like the ramifications, as you said, of like, you know, Rick's carelessness or all these things, you know, or Morty's being Morty.
Right, any character's flaws, basically. Yeah, like just shown a large mirror held up against them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's all just dialed up. But then there's a few, but as you say, that's like the tone of that is generally still, no, I guess lighthearted. It's sort of part of the comedy, but there's a few really heavy punches throughout the seasons where they just drop the comedy.
Yes.
Of it, and they really just let the human emotion side of it like really lay bare, which again is, you know, another sort of contrast that's thrown in there, and again could be really polarizing, like because they deal with some quite heavy stuff, like you know, mental health wise. So.
And that is, it's interesting because you make me realize that, in a sense, a lot of the show's comedy comes from us seeing Rick's perspective. And because it is such a ridiculous, like, and there are so many words I guess you could use to describe him, but it is such a Rick perspective, right? It is so smartest man in the world, doesn't care about anybody, but really is afraid to die, kind of, you know, all this wrapped up in that. And it's like, you do have to be ready for that. But what's interesting, that's what's interesting is it has to be that way. Like you basically get to see it through his cynical eyes, but it does allow them to do what you said, Tim. They basically just take movies and do them. They do movies. And they're not shy about this fact, especially later. Now, Dan Harmon does this in every show he writes. In Community, they just do movies. They do the movie that's My Dinner with Andre. They just did a Rick and Morty episode that was My Dinner with Andre. Same thing, you know? So it's like, it's just what they do. And it's hard to describe this because what I love about it, and this is sort of like getting off of even what I wanted to talk about, but I think this is all valid. What I love about it is there is so much for me there. You know, when you watch an episode where, well, and there are just a lot of fun ones, but when you watch some of these episodes that are like, they're movies, you get sort of the full weight of this whole movie in the 22 or whatever minutes. Because you remember all of the context they set up in the movie. It's almost like a higher level of TV show, not in that it's better, but that it requires to get it all, it requires a level of understanding. It's like you have to have taken the 101 to take the 102. You can take the 102 without the 101, but you're just not going to get all of it. You know, it's not going to be the same for you. Tim, it looks
Barker,
like you got, yeah.
I was going to say, Barker in the chat said the Meeseeks episode and Anatomy Park.
Short game.
Park.
Okay.
Where's my insurance?
I think that Anatomy Park is usually the turning point for most people who are on the fence. If that episode doesn't win you over, the show's not for you, in my opinion.
Right.
If you watch season 1, episode 1, and then you're like, okay. And then the second one, you're like, okay. And then by Anatomy Park, it's like, what? So you brought up something that I wanted to bring up as well, James, but I'm going to be a little more specific about it, and this is another polarizing thing. There's a lot of what could be called inside baseball. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking, self-referential things to comedy, writing, television. And so if you don't like that, that is also a very polarizing thing. Like, he'll say something like, geez, Morty, you can't just put another word in front of a car part. And, he basically says you can't put another word in front of a car part and explain it away as sci-fi. And then he does it.
Yes. And that is very much, that meta comedy is like, a hallmark of the show.
Love it.
And I do, yes, this, Yes, I completely agree. I think what I, especially because you brought up the idea that they sort of do movies, they do a Star Wars. Rick even says, "Oh, I guess we're doing a mother effing Star Wars now," because he knows it's like we got to go on the big. That's what's so interesting about that is it shows you one that you can get a whole show out of the same story, right? So sure. To anyone, and I've been hearing this a lot more from some people that are like trying to get into creating. They're so worried about ideas, and I forgot what it was like to be like that, to worry about ideas. I actually just watched a few videos of a few famous writers just a little earlier today, and they were talking about they all had such different perspectives on where their ideas came from. R.L. Stine, who famously wrote children's books, he says, I don't write down my ideas. I work on one idea at a time, and that's it. I don't carry around a notebook. And then you cut to Judy Blume, and she says, oh, you need to I keep a notebook because it's those things that you hear people say in public that will give you your best ideas, and then there was David Sedaris was the other one, and he mentions having he made me laugh a lot because the first line of it's from Masterclass is he says everything's funny eventually, and it just made me laugh out loud because it's one of those very broad premises that seems like it's unfair to say. It couldn't be true, but in a sense you're like, no, I guess he's right. Everything's funny eventually.
Do you know the Mel Brooks quote for that?
No.
So the Mel Brooks quote for that is, "Comedy is tragedy plus time."
Oh yes, okay, I remember that. Yeah.
Is that Mel Brooks? Yeah, right.
I've heard him say it.
Right? Yeah, I did.
So I heard him say it in a documentary.
But yeah, so that idea that they made a show out of implementing, because there's one that's they take parts from Training Day. They take parts from Manchurian Candidate. I can just name movies all day. But really what they did is they took a cool situation from that and just put it in their world. I say they did a Training Day, but it's so far away from it. But because they own where they got it, we know. You know what I mean? Usually you don't get that extra layer in TV shows. I guess all of that is to say that I'm now saying all of this to you, realizing why I love the meta aspect of TV shows now. Is because it's like an extra layer. There are shows now, it's increasingly more popular to have a sign very briefly on the screen and then it disappears. You're required to look it up on YouTube or back up or pause. There's not, shows are becoming something different. They're putting more things in them now. I don't know. That's getting a little bit off track, but I believe what I was saying was, because they're just implementing stuff, we talked earlier about how we can take our ideas and we can separate making it cool from making it work, right? The execution versus the concept, I think, is what I said. Obviously, we can talk more about... I didn't really plan a ton of this. We can talk more about Rick and Morty, obviously. I don't know. I'm not used to hosting. I'm asking you guys what you want to do. My plan was we were going to create something. But I wanted us to just, throw some stuff together and, in a sense, just talk about which parts were concept and which parts were execution to make it clear how different they are, how separate they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I didn't consider it. I could, I always do this on stream. It's funny. I guess somebody could get the link now. Oh, no, it doesn't show. Okay. I always get my Google Drive link in there, and I'm, always concerned.
Oh.
But so I'm going to send you guys a link that probably is not, is
something
only view.
That I want to say about how I perceive Rick and Morty's creators, because I've never seen any kind of inside or behind the scenes, but from their experiences in other interviews that I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
So I've seen Dan Harmon a lot. I'm a big fan of Dan Harmon. He's one of the few people that I I'm like, yeah, him and Kevin Feige are pretty high up there for me, of people who I look to and say they are doing something special. And I think that they're the kind of writing team that says, all right, we're going to do a Training Day. And they don't care. That's the point. That's the idea. And then I know that there's a lot of improvisational stuff too, where they do alternate takes and things like that. So I can totally hear them just having a blast. And then, they know they're doing a Training Day, so they hang a lantern on it, they change it. But the thing I was going to mention is that doesn't make me enjoy Rick and Morty any less. So while we're not suggesting plagiarism, taking the framework of something that works and adding in the ingredients of the Rick and Morty characters, which are totally unique, creates a new thing every time.
Yeah.
So I just want to point out that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Start out and just mimic the act structure for Star Wars. It will change.
Exactly. You'll have to change
no harm,
it.
Yeah, there's no harm in it. Works. It's tightly plotted. It works. It boom. You can use that as a place to start. That's all I wanted to say. That in their writer's room, I'm sure they go, "Hey, let's do a training day."
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
the
hey,
Anatomy Park episode, I can imagine that. Like, we can speculate that. All right, we're going to do a Jurassic Park episode. How would that work? Like, you know, and then someone would pitch, what about if it's like the park is inside a human and like Rick shrinks himself down and goes in, or like he's got, you know, some doctor that he's working with on the inside, you know, and just, I can see how it would have gone like that. And then, you know, all right, well, in Jurassic Park, you know, there's what's his name? Nedry?
Yeah, Dennis Nedry.
The anagram for nerdy. Fantastic. Who's like, you know, stealing the DNA samples or whatever. So who are we going to have and what are they going to be stealing, you know? You can see how they would have just picked out the sort of pillars of Jurassic Park. And
exactly, like there's the things you have to have, and then there are the things you can change. Yeah, and they're just like, they'll just it's Jurassic Park if this happens. It doesn't matter what is being stolen. It just somebody needs to steal something here, you know?
And I think with the way they approach it, like you were saying, Tim, obviously don't plagiarize. I think the way they approach it is it's pretty clearly satire. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that plays a lot differently too. I actually was. It's funny you mentioned that. I was going to put an asterisk on it and say that they are able to more easily do that because they can make fun of it.
Yes, absolutely.
It is a little tougher to go, well, what would my character really be doing there? And for it to not feel like, you know, I've heard some complaints that the book Aragon is basically like Star Wars, like almost like name swap. Like the first one is A New Hope, almost word for word in terms of, well, beat for beat.
Yeah, no, that's a funny way to put it. Just like, but literally made me laugh. That's word for word. Bluke Dragon Walker. I don't know.
Barker said Kiel ruins Jurassic Park is name of video.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a bunch of chat. I'm really bad about it, and then I just go back.
I'm watching it. He also
forever,
says the Orville does this so well.
Well, that's the thing. Going
a lot
back,
of really good stuff in there.
Exactly. Going back even further, Barker mentioned it took me so long before I learned how to play like myself. There's a lot there. That's like a Zen saying of Miles Davis, but it's just like everybody can learn a lot from that. You know, what does the best person say about how they learn to play, and it's so relatable. Barker also says Tom York wrote much of Kid A by writing lines on scraps of paper and drawing them randomly. That is really interesting, right? That shows you, again, execution versus concept. The concept is I need a line here. I have a bag of lines. I'm going to pick a line out of the bag, and it's this line. That's it. Tim, in the last stream we did, talked about how AWOL Nation sort of worried so little about some aspects of the song Sail, and it became their most popular song, and I don't think that those things aren't related, you know, where sometimes worrying less about what it is, because you know which parts are which, you can make sure you go, no, I anything cool can be here, but the system has to work, you know.
Yeah. Which, I mean, bringing that back to Rick and Morty, like, they have a character just called Bird Person. That probably came up as an improv line, and then that's an actual character that's recurring, you know, and is like Rick's best friend and like Bird Person. Like certain things they just don't care about because it fits, you know, it works, it gets the point across,
And then later, said character gets renamed, and everybody starts complaining about the new. Oh, that's what we landed on. Like,
in character,
that is so the show, and so this is actually something that. Was very liberating for me is that I was watching a video of Tom Morello, and he was kind of talking about how he developed his style of playing guitar. And Tom Morello is the guitarist for Rage Against the Machine. He's also done some solo work and Audio Slave. But watching this video, I realized that the reason between Tom Morello and maybe another guitarist who might be similar or equal in skill is that he just isn't afraid of what he puts out. And some of it's awesome, and some of it isn't. But what I watched in the video is how fearless. He was just like, here's a riff. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to build a song around that. And now a song exists, and maybe it's someone's favorite song, and maybe it's my least favorite song. But if you do that enough and you have 50 songs, then you're going to be far, far ahead of the person that's still working on the one to try to make it perfect. So it was very liberating when I saw him just, this is what we'll do, and then this will be next, and this, and I was like,
That's
so
awesome.
I'm trying to
It's
mimic
like,
that more.
I don't know if this term is already coined. If not, I'm definitely staking a claim to the quote. But it makes me think of just like create recklessly as a philosophy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, or create boldly, you know? Just go with what you feel and see where it leads, right? And
Barker says that agrees with you wholeheartedly about Tom Morello. He's one of the few guitarists comparable to Hendrix in my mind. Less to do with technical skill and more to do with innovation and just going for it. I think people would be surprised by how many of their favorite things were somebody going for it. Or like, I think, okay, and I have an idea of what I want to make, but I wanted to tell a story. I watched a video where Matt Stone or Trey Parker, I don't know. It was like a podcast, a short thing on YouTube, and it was, and the name of the video was stupid. What's that?
Just saying one of them South
Oh yeah, one of them South Park guys, but it was specifically one and not the other. But I'm like, he was on screen, but I don't know him by name, whatever. But yeah, but the idea is he talked about how they have been waiting to get sort of run out of town, is the way he put it, for 20 years. Right there, somebody said to them, "Hey, you can kind of get away with anything. Like, how does that work? How does why do you think that is?" And they kind of were like, we are still waiting for the day that we get run out of town. I say that because as much as you may or may not like South Park, again, there's sort of a concept versus execution thing. You may not agree with the concept, but you can't argue with the execution. They were at one point, and probably still, where they got their process so refined that they could make an episode so quickly that they could be so topically on top of what it was. You know what I mean? They were so topical. It was one of the most topical TV shows that was created. That's a huge deal, but that's pure execution. It does not matter if you're making this show, that show, or that. It doesn't matter if you're making Rick and Morty or Downton Abbey. If you can do that, it becomes something different. And I say that because even the people that are out there doing it, to them, they feel like, just like you might, everybody's looking at them going, "You're not going to do that. Like, what, are you crazy?" And like you said, Tom Morello is sort of an example of not having that, where he has apparently gotten to the point where he goes, "No, we're just doing it. I just trust this enough that if I spit out a riff, we can make something cool out of it. I no longer take for granted the fact that I'm good at making music. It doesn't matter what the riff is. If it's a riff, I'll write a cool tag for it. And if I don't, I won't release it." Or in his case, maybe he will, right?
Well, and so just to give you a little more context of something else that really changed how I thought of creating, Tom Morello has a very specific setup for his guitar effects, but it's limited on purpose, he said.
Oh, okay,
He said,
yeah.
So in other words, he has like a whammy pedal, he has a delay pedal, there are a few pedals. I think that there's probably 6 or something, and that's it. And he has the same ones, and maybe they'll change eventually, but he said that he keeps those same pedals because they suit his playing style best, and also he would rather get more creative having to think outside the box with what he has than get a new pedal that does a thing. And I thought, man, that is just a really classic example of the fact that creativity is pushed by limitation. And we've talked about that before, but I just wanted to mention that about him too, because he could have any pedal he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Big time.
And I think
definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
Thrives. Sorry, I was just going to reiterate, just paraphrase. Like creativity definitely thrives under parameters, right? And like can even be like the more tight the parameters, the more it can thrive potentially, because it's you just have to innovate more. Like the tighter the parameters, the more you have to innovate, I guess.
And I haven't talked about this much, but I love saying this phrase, and we can explore it a little more. When I'm creating, and really I come from a programming background where this is 100% true. All problems are solvable. Now, when I'm creating, the problem is, well, this person needs to be at the bar. I need to make that make sense. This person needs to be afraid of the dark. I need to make that make sense. My problem is that I need to convince you that this person is the way I'm saying they are or want them to be, right? But all of those things are solvable. And again, this comes down to the concept versus execution, because there's a show like Trailer Park Boys where they can win or they can lose, but they always go to jail. You know, like there are some things that just... do you like Trailer Park Boys too? Do you watch that, Kiel?
Yeah, I've seen the first season or two quite a while ago.
Okay, yeah, all right. I didn't know, because that's one that Cassie and I watch just sort of, every once in a while pop it on, because it's a special show, but for very special reasons. But that's the thing. In the show Trailer Park Boys, some of the characters always do something in like certain situations. It's almost like they have superpowers. And you'll see this a lot narratively, but this show does it really well. Silicon Valley kind of does it, but they more do alignments. But what you have is, narratively, a character has about them things that will sort of always be true. And so Ricky in the show Trailer Park Boys, like, he is always doing crime. Like, he's, like, selling, like, marijuana, and he's always got a gun, and he's just doing stupid things. And he's so, like, he's not very smart. But he can always outsmart the police. If the police are called, he can talk them. It's like, I liken it to abilities in the game Spire. Narratively, it has to work. So no matter what he says, what ridiculous thing he comes up with, it works. The thing is, you know it's going to work, right? So what I want to do is I want to make sort of this little thing that you can overlay in a game. And it doesn't have to be quite so narratively strong, but where you can sort of take on traits about your character. Think what I think like backgrounds and flaws and bonds and ideals did in 5th edition. We're going to sort of do, we're going to come up with this idea where narratively, when you're making your character, you can go, I want to use this tool that, we made on this stream. I want to be the kind of person that always has, a cigarette. It was another good one, like an ability right out of Spire, was like, you've always got a little bit of whiskey in your flask, and you've always got like 3 cigarettes left, You can't use it to give out unlimited cigarettes, but you're that person. You're the type of person who would XYZ,
One thing before we move on from something that you said, because it's come up twice now, I want to give everybody permission when creating, and this is the easiest way to do it. James, you're writing a scene, and you have to come up for a reason why that person is afraid of the dark. It's real tempting to stop and start thinking about that, which is akin to like starting a load of laundry while you're cooking. So,
yeah.
Right. So what I will tell you to do instead is just put in brackets the word reasons with a capital R. That's what I do. Okay, this person's afraid of the dark for reasons. This is also very helpful when you're communicating an idea to another person, because it is so often that on the fly, you're trying to come up with reasons, and that's not the point of the idea. But when you say that to the person, they miss all the other parts of the idea, and they go, wait, but that doesn't make sense why they're afraid of the dark. And you're like, yeah, no.
Don't worry about the execution. Hear the concept I'm giving you, exactly.
Right, and in fact, that has helped us a lot in AbTab. We just say, hey, for reasons. Another good one is to say, put a pin in it, which means I know we have to solve this problem, but for now, that's not the problem we're talking about.
Exactly.
And to circle back to what you said before,
yeah.
James, it's solvable. Every problem's solvable, Those brackets can and will be filled with something cool. It's just a matter of coming back to it. Yeah.
Exactly. And to put that a different way, this is the way I see it is, I put the brackets there because I don't know what it is yet, but the longer I create, the easier those brackets will be to fill in. Those brackets eventually can only be one thing because I've made enough over here. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, so it's almost better sometimes to leave it because you're like, oh, they're afraid of the dark because that other thing I made, right? But if you haven't made that other thing and you just put a different reason now, yeah. So another very, very common thing, but yes,
it's that revelation when you suddenly turn to your board on the wall with pins and strings and drag one across between a piece of string across between two.
Oh, that's so great.
Exactly
that's
that.
Such a great feeling because
if
you, like especially when you're DMing. But there's a quote, or not a quote, but an example that Barker put in the chat that I think is really important, and it'll stick with people. Barker's favorite example is have 2 separate people draw a Christmas tree. Person 1 has no limitations. Person 2 only has to use triangles. Person 2 will often draw a cooler Christmas tree faster. So
there's also something that comes with constraints, especially from another person, that almost gives you a confidence that you wouldn't have otherwise. If I tell you to
Absolutely.
draw a Christmas tree with triangles, you go, oh, that must be the way people do it, right? You just grab all this context, this baggage where you have confidence. Just do that when you're making your own stuff, right? It's the same.
Right.
I know that advice is worthless, but hearing me say it hopefully will eventually lead you to the epiphany where you understand what I mean. So if we could, let's identify things, if you guys can, like in a TV show where things happen and people say the same thing all the time. Actually, thought of one immediately. Every time the professor makes an announcement, he says good news in Futurama. Right? Like, that's a touchstone. That's something you can rely on. It's even better if it's, like I said, something from, or rather we need a mixture of, somebody that always can just talk their way out of the police. Some things are like rules about the world. I learned this recently. There were rules in the writing of SpongeBob. One of them was that he was never allowed to get his boating license. Like, it was always a point of contention. He was trying to get it, but as a part of the writing rules, they were never allowed to give it to him.
That's so
In
fun.
my opinion,
Right.
sometimes you should have things like that about your character, because it creates a scene where everybody's watching and they know that you'll never reconcile the death of your wife. But what are you doing? You're here lamenting. I don't know why I said it, but I was worrying about how you say the game. I don't know. I was, yeah.
Lamentations.
But you're crying out over the death of your wife, and you hope you eventually get over it. But we all know that it's not going to, right? That's the tragedy. It's less tragic, if that's what you're going for, if we don't know that that's true, right? So in a sense, it's almost like sometimes these things can be truths about your character that your character doesn't even know. But that because we know them, it brings almost that added extra element that we talked about from Rick and Morty, where if you know, it's even more,
Yeah.
I said
I
no
have an
a lot.
idea.
Yeah.
And this might not be what you're talking about, but like in The Office, Jim and Pam always get away with pranks. They never get in trouble for all the ridiculous stuff they do.
And exactly. Stuff like that is good. It's like narrative rules, like where, because in Trailer Park Boys, it's the same. They do eventually go to jail, but it's like a thing that usually happens at the end of the season. So all the rest of the time, when they have their guns out, you're not concerned they're going to jail. They're shooting people and robbing places, and it's almost like you just know, if you've seen the show, that. So yes, like narrative rules like that, I really like.
And they do break it on purpose when Idris Elba is the boss and Jim comes to work in a
We
tuxedo.
just watched that one.
Where you go, oh, he is getting in trouble for a prank. He goes, you think that's funny, Halpert? You know?
Let me add an extra layer to that. And this may or may not be true. This is Charles Minor is the guy that Idris Elba plays in that episode. He comes in. He's the new boss that doesn't get along with Michael. Spoilers for The Office. Michael ends up quitting over this. And they had a narrative problem they had to solve. Why wouldn't David Wallace say, hey, Jim should be the next manager? Michael leaves, Jim's the next guy that it would obviously be. They sort of set the constraint that Charles Minor has to like nobody in the office because he's eventually going to make an outside hire. Okay, so that begs the question, why? What does Jim do? Not if, but it's what does Jim do that makes Charles Minor not like him? The question becomes, what's the implementation? We already have the concept. Charles Minor can't like any of them, And it's like, once you know that, you can go, oh, he's getting up to some business because that's what he's always doing, like you said, Tim. It's his thing. We get a subversion there because, well, Charles Minor has to not like him, so let's tie those things together. That's arcs. That's narrative, It's just, this thing, that thing, let's have them meet, in a sense. So, absolutely stuff like that. Because the other thing to that is, so we're talking about, like, things that'll sort of be about your character, in a sense. And that means that you can have things that are multiple people. So in that case, it's like you said, Jim and Pam are always like, when they do stuff together, they don't get in trouble, right? If Jim does stuff alone in this role-playing game that is now The Office, he can get in trouble. Like, the rule is so specific, Because what we're doing here is we're trying to give something that people could add to their game, but that really just changes the way they act as their character. Not necessarily one that has to, unless they opt into this extra added feature, that it can, like, change the narrative so strongly. Does that make sense? Like, some things are skin enough that you can just throw them in. So,
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Fate, the game Fate, a little.
Yeah, right.
Aspects and the kind of like, you know, that sounded like a Fate, and I can't remember. There are a couple of different things in Fate that are all samey sounding, but I think there's like aspects and knacks or something. I don't know.
But yeah.
But that sounded like one when you said, like, I could see in a hard-boiled detective kit, it would be always got to smoke.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? So it's like, so I don't know if that's helpful. Like, if we could use that sort of.
Well, and
I don't know
it
how
is
powerful you want these things to be either, because in Fate, it's like character concepts.
And that's the exact thing I was going to say. Is this is exactly what you see in Fate, but Fate ties it to the mechanics. This wouldn't be. This would be like for you. So that is a good example, Tim, because really what I think we should start with is like a template, and you would come up with a lot of these. But again, we're going concept execution. We're going to make one, even though we'd have a bunch. We can make this little template if we want of like, and I had something for this, but you are an adjective. You know, you've seen these types of things before. You are a noun who adjectives, I think is what it is. Does that make sense? You are a noun who verbs. I'm sorry, guys. I was trying to think so much of the sentence that I didn't even worry about what the words I was saying meant, even though it was so clearly wrong, you know? It was like the pattern I was looking for. I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
That was in an early version of the 5-minute RPG, and it still might be in it eventually, but it is character creation was you are a blank that has blank. So it was like you pick, you know, samurai, cyborg. You write samurai on one line, you write cyborg on the other, and then depending on what you could augment one ability with that. So you get a +1 to your strength because you're a cyborg. You get a +1 to your agility because you're a samurai, and then you get to write in a power. So it was like awesome with swords. And if
like
anything
laser
related to
eyes or...
laser eyes, or like if anything was related to that, you could say, can I use my laser eyes? Or, hey, I'm awesome with swords, and you would also get to add a +1 to that. It was very narrative, but that was also mechanical.
Yeah, and that is like, that's what's so interesting is many games tie it into the character. That sounds funny. Like, I have this weird, like, sort of maybe lofty theoretical idea where what I love about this is separating it from what people can do. Does that make sense? So, like, not to say that anything what you said was bad, just that what I love about this and what I want to do in sort of games I'm working on is to have your character be this thing that you do have full control over. And again, this would be like, so let's imagine we're going to play a 5th edition fantasy game. We could make it in Dragongrin if we wanted. And we would basically come up with something that somebody could make, and it would make their character very specific, right? It would give them that goal of like, oh, I know we have like a lot of things in plot hooks for this, but it tells you the type of person you are, you know? So I have this like little template. You are a noun who verbs that always can't or would never, you know, do something. You know what I mean? So if you look at what this becomes, what I would supply to somebody would be the template, and then like you said, Tim, there would be different like play sets in a sense, where if you want to make a hard-boiled detective, use these verbs, these nouns, you know, like if you use from the set I give you, you will create the thing that you're trying to create. So because we're talking about concept versus execution, assuming the execution is cool, right? How does this concept feel to you guys? Do you feel like there is a use case for this? Does this seem like something that is unhelpful, something that's been done before? Like, basically, how does it hit you? And does am I solving a problem nobody has, right? Like, is it something that can you see the value in it?
Yeah, I can, certainly. I always love extra like tools and ways to be able to for creating characters, whether it's my player character or whether it's NPCs, if I'm playing or running a game, or if it's extra tools to use to come up with interesting, compelling characters for like writing fiction or whatever. So I love this kind of thing. So I think for me it will be something that I would certainly use. Just in terms of the specific concept of, so it's for an RPG. This is like part of the concept, right? It's like for an RPG, and so we're saying could be used for use with anything really, or 5e specifically. I guess anything, because it's
really anything.
Mechanics. That's the point. That's the
concept, and even right? Going further to say it would be a tool that you could use to model a character for a story you were writing. And I only say that because the things simply don't differ. You know, it's just that we're sort of making it with the lens of that. But
one thing that jumps out to me is maybe there's quite a big spectrum there between like always has a smoke. You know, there's sort of character like quirks, sort of personality type things, and then the
sort of
impact
description
that they have on the story. You know, like the way they influence the story, or the story influences them. And that's the headspace that I've been in for a little while with that Story D6 game that I'm making. So where it is a little bit more of a writer's room like play style, where so just thinking a bit more in terms of the impact that characters have on story and vice versa. So but even with that, sorry, I'm just sort of
no, you're good. I'm here for it. Like we're just
you're good.
Yeah.
It's like even on the sort of lighter end of the spectrum, where it's always has a smoke, that can still be a really compelling character aspect and can even be leveraged like and impact the story. Like that could be, the fact that they offer another character a smoke could make a meaningful connection between them. Gives them a character connection that they need to make, in terms of concept. Well, we know these two characters have to meet because then later on this is going to happen.
Exactly,
So even those like seemingly innocuous ones, you can then, that's just more hooks, more fodder that you can then draw from. So
okay. I imagined this as something that would be more usable, that people could sort of overlay in their games, and they would still be able to do that. But then another part of me wants to remove that constraint and allow it to be, basically, this is something that would be more at home in someone's game as something they could use. Because like you said, we're introducing this concept of those narrative powers, and I really do love that idea, because we say powers, but it's almost funny. I feel like I'm caught between telling you that it's narrative or that it's mechanical. There's no in between, and I don't know how to solve that, I guess. So that's not necessarily a conversation for now, but
so one of the two things. One, and Kiel, I had a similar concern, which was if it's not specific to the size and scope of what you can do, people who are less experienced or want to take advantage of the system can write in really big ones, right? So that's one thing. Put a pin in that. The second thing is the way that some games handle this, like Powered by the Apocalypse or Ironsworn, is they have a mechanical thing that interacts with your narrative thing. Yeah. So they have moves. So the move is an object outside of the game, outside of the character, that the character can perform. So the move is Sojourn. Everyone makes that move. Your narrative ability impacts the fiction. So you don't have much mechanics, but it's like, hey, because you always have a smoke, when you go to treat with someone, when you go to parlay or whatever, you add this and you get momentum. So it is very mechanical in that way, but it is this middle ground between, for me anyway, mechanics and narrative.
I do see what you mean. I was talking more of the idea that it has to be, it's coupled to that game, right? You can't take that out because the game without moves, you can't do anything with the moves. That's the idea, is I'm describing something that can't exist because we enjoy it if it ties in with the mechanics, but if it's agnostic, you know what I mean? It's really like, I wish something could live there, but what I'm describing is another game that does that. And in a perfect world, it wouldn't have to, but kind of at the bottom of this, I'm finding like, I like ideas like this for people, but I don't know how to package them. So let's talk about another thing that is in this same vein, because here's what we have. In my opinion, I say the bottom of this. We talked about this a lot. We got there. I had this idea. I got to bounce it off to people. And I'm realizing, not necessarily having been convinced or anything like that, I'm realizing because of the stuff we found, it's like, okay, this should be in a game, not necessarily separate, right? The concept, in my opinion, is not exciting me. So in a sense, what I'm going to do is move on to another concept and see how you guys feel about it, right? That's the point. I think that we could execute what I just laid out very well, but I don't think that anyone would care. That's where we landed, right? Those things are so separate in my mind, and I think people should see them that way.
Well, and the test, I think, is to put your own self in the line of your rules. So what I mean is, as a designer for years, I would create these rules like I was creating in a laboratory and then presenting them to people.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So instead, I'm not saying we do this with that, but one of the things that I have always then tried to do is, okay, I'm going to use this for my home game. Do I like it?
Yeah.
And so I would say for you, if to test what you're talking about, I would say, all right, James, I'm running a Dragon Grin one-shot. You have to use your own method to make your character. And does it excite you? And what about it excites you? Or it also gives us a really specific use case.
Yeah.
That you don't have to come up with a bunch of stuff. You know Dragon Grin well enough. So anyway, that's what I would probably do. Whatever we come up with, I'll have you tell me, or maybe Kiel tell me a character concept using it. And then let's see if it's fun.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's the main thing is like, but in my opinion, what you're describing is making it good. And I'm saying even the best version of what we talked about doesn't fit somewhere. That's
I agree.
Yeah.
And then so I'm saying, I'm down for the new concept. I'm just saying whatever concept you come up with, I'm going to try to make a real character with.
Oh, exactly. And I do, because, well, the next concept was something a little different. It was really something in a similar vein. And I really, I'm just like having a few ideas and I'm bouncing them off you guys. There's no necessarily rhyme or reason. But so this one was
game design.
That's called game design, exactly. And this one's a little less game, but this is for this tool. My goal here is to give people, give people that are learning RPGs a way to give cool descriptions of what they're doing. And I think that it is very simple, but that's where this is, again, where this sort of thing would live. This would be like a player aid, right? This would just be something a player does on their own, not necessarily something that's a part of your game, but you would be able to say to somebody, oh yeah, I'm using that system. But the idea is it's your turn, let's say, and remember, this isn't rules. Every time I show somebody this, they're like, oh, but what if I want it? And I'm like, no. I'm going to give you a template of what you can say when it's your turn and you want to do a cool description of what you're doing, right? But if you're better, if you have a different idea, you can do that too. You'll say something about the world. You'll say something about your character in the world, probably. And then and now I'm brainstorming because I'm like, I have stuff written down, but I just want to give you the idea. And then you say something about what you're doing. So we're going to say one sentence about each. So I ask you, I go, okay, what's your character doing? My constraints now are I get to say one sentence about each of these things. So I say one thing about the world. I can, I can think about it, right? We're playing a game, we're sitting there. I'm not saying you have to come up with this on the fly, but now you know what you need to think of. Your mind isn't swimming, and I guess we're talking constraints. So I go, okay, it's your turn, and you say, the dripping of the sewers around me, is loud, and every step I take, seems even louder. My hood lowers as I'm, walking past the rats and I recoil, seeing them. I sneak up to the wall and look around it. Do I see anything? By constraining myself to 3 sentences, and really this is the tool for me. I don't ramble on for like 7-10 sentences and somebody's like, okay, so what the heck are you doing?
What are you doing? Are the rats wearing the hoods?
Yeah, like you're just lost. And so I like the idea of like a few little things like this that's like when you're doing X, just like, because you can kind of fall back on these templates. Maybe you'll say 2 things about the world. What I love is that you now know you have the tool. So I guess what I would say is we would come up with some of these things like these say something about the world, say something about your character, like.
Sure, like boilerplate.
Little templates.
Subjects.
Exactly. We would maybe think about
like,
what
yeah.
we describe and try to abstract it into something that's like, well, what do we usually do, you know?
Well, something that comes to mind for the something about the world is, or maybe one or two, is the five senses, right? Because you were talking about the dripping, so that was sound.
Oh, yeah.
My thought was the smell for the sewer, you know, so that's a great little tidbit.
And that's the thing,
Yeah,
like, you can sort of
emotions.
mix and match many of these things, but...
And then the last one will be related to your motivations.
Oh, okay. Even better. Oh my gosh, even better. See, this is why game design. Go ahead, Tim.
I was gonna say, so the other thing is that this is a very abstracted thing that I do when I'm playing games, but I'm not talking about
That's exactly what I want to hear about, though. Yeah, like, yeah.
I call these lenses.
Okay, yeah, and that's a concept that should be in this, absolutely.
So a merchant will be thinking of the value of things, and a fighter will be thinking of the tactical position of things. So if a desk is destroyed, the fighter might not care because they're using it as a tactical advantage. They push it out a window or whatever. The merchant would think of the value. So what I would do is I would say, you know, and this ties in, Kiel, to kind of what you're saying with the motivations, but it also leans into a little more about like personality as well. Like I would write down a couple, like 2 or 3 lenses, and I don't use them all the time, but usually when I want to have a character moment that feels like a character moment, I draw upon one of those things and say, oh, this is how I would view it. And it's a really good way because you think, okay, what would a merchant think about this sewer? And you think, you know, and it gets you thinking, like, I don't know, what would I be thinking? Oh, and I could make a comment. I have the perfect, you know, waterproof cloak back at my shop, you know, whatever. And now all of a sudden I have a shop, you know, so.
Yeah, and
that was
what,
great. Just
yeah.
Sorry, just before I forget this thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you're talking about there was, because to me that, what would this merchant think about being in this sewer, you know? And that's the reality we're faced with whenever we're role playing. Is like this character, and you know all these details about this character you've created and how would they react in this situation. The parameters are like that. When you shrink it down to the lens of this character thinks of the value of everything, that is like the lens that everything passes through. That just shrinks the parameters down. I'm in a sewer thinking about the value of things. I'm worried about the clothes I'm wearing getting dirty, you know, exactly. So that's how you came to that waterproof cloak sort of idea.
Exactly. And then the other thing quickly is that, James, this might work very well as questions. What I mean is, rather than it being it could be both and, but how do you feel about the location you're in? Well, and if I look down, I can answer that with one of these patterns.
Well, exactly, and so that would be good for like that would be the thing that would interchange, right? So that the template would be say something about the world. This would then sort of change to questions about the world, right? And we, what are you sensing? You know, just as an example to show you, absolutely, right. Like that would be, you know, what it is.
Because
what
it prompts a different thought
than
just seeing a sentence. People tend to naturally answer questions.
Well, and another, that's the thing to say, right? And we didn't sort of get to cover all of this, but the point would be this would sort of eventually become something you draw on. You know, less something that you're like, oh, I need my card and stuff. And that's why it's hard to describe, like, that eventually happens. And because this is something you can use in every game to some degree, you know, it's a thing you become familiar with, and that would be the goal. So I do agree with you, but the eventual goal would be to sort of wean someone off of the cards, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah. And even then, I think...
and I agree, you know, about the questions.
It's great to have in the heat of the moment when you're improving to look.
Well, and like I said, it would be questions. I do, you know, we changed it effectively. Like I'm certainly not saying it wouldn't be. Just that the hierarchical difference of there's the template, and then the execution. The implementation, the execution here is, it'd be the questions. You'd have world questions, you know, and the different things.
Which could be, you know, the GM and all the players have access to that during play, you know, so it could be if the GM wants to specifically prompt a particular character, or if the players want to, you know, like want to have their own character moment when it's their turn, then they can look down at it and unprompted by the GM, they can prompt themselves with these questions, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
There's a parallel that I'm seeing here with something like a little trinity or Venn diagram or something that I've been learning about in therapy, which is thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So like thoughts like inform your feelings, and then your feelings inform your behaviors, and it's a kind of parallel to what we're seeing here. So I don't know if that those terms in there would be handy as well.
That's
it's
really
like, what
cool.
are you thinking? What are you feeling?
Yeah.
And how does that make you behave? You know, that's
what are
the
you
human
doing? So
exactly, and yeah, and that's like sort of what I was going for here when you mentioned the lenses, Tim. This is sort of like a condensed down lenses. That's what I meant. I'm highlighting. I don't know if you can see the template from earlier.
Let me see.
You are a noun who verbs that can.
Lenses,
Oh
like,
yeah.
Because
I'm imagining like this telescopic, you know, like with all the little
That's
lenses.
exactly
different
how I
colored
imagine it
lenses,
too.
You like pick the right ones. Yeah.
and by filling out something like this, that's why this like concept is so hard. Apparently, I'm still learning how to give this to somebody to explain this, you know. But that's the idea. Is this isn't supposed to be like who you are. This is like a thing, you know, just like there's a part of your character sheet that nobody looks at, that is your extra equipment. You always write stuff there and you forget about it, right? That's this part where you're like, oh, if I want to use it, oh, I'm a so-and-so who does this. How would I see this situation, right? It is this whole template is what I was going for, is it's your lens. Because it's not, and again, we did talk about a lot of things, because that's a little bit less like you have the power, and more that anytime so-and-so is faced with this, everybody knows exactly what they're going to get from them. And so the goal, with that is to build like similar to what we have. I know sometimes that, for example, my family is not very good at being punctual. If we all have to gather somewhere at the same time, I just know that they're bad at that, I would like to find a way to create that, in going back to concept one, just to touch on what you said about lenses, to create sort of those expectations. Because if you are playing a character and we all do have access to this information, I can write on my own, I'm the type of person that's always worrying about how expensive stuff is, and I get to mention it and you get to mention it. Because you know how I can be, and it's like it is, the beauty of that is you, as limiting as it seems, when everybody has those things about them, as you said, you can say anything, but you always have that to fall back on. That's kind of a way to look at it. That helps me, is a way to look back on it,
Yeah.
or to fall back on, these templates and things like this. So Kiel, I saw you were adding some stuff, some lenses.
Just those examples that Tim put earlier, yeah.
Oh yeah. So and that idea where here it is like, that is exactly what I want. Is I want a tool for people who feel like they're playing a role-playing game and they're like, I don't know what to do. I've had people in games that said they wanted to be there, and then the whole time they were like silent and didn't say anything, and trying to call on them and giving them the sort of grace in a sense. But it's almost like, if I am not aware, then I don't know exactly what you want to happen. You know what I mean? There's sort of a mismatch. But I loved what you said, Kiel. I like this as a thing that you can refer to among people, because if I can say, hey, give me, there would be a cool term for it or whatever. Give me a 1, 2, 3 of what you're doing. That would be one thing about the world, one thing about whatever, and maybe it's a 2 and 1 of the other. But that idea to be able to offer you the constraint, because there's a beauty in that. There's a level of management that gets reduced if I say, Kiel, you tell me one thing about the world, one thing about this, and one thing about your motivations while describing what you're doing. You can say like so much, but like you said, it's narrowed those parameters where you will probably go, oh yeah, I was just about to hit that guy with my axe. This is how I'm feeling. You almost know all that. I'm just like pulling it out of you,
And interestingly, the world in that context
1, 2, 3
is the world is the enemy that you're facing. Like,
yes,
what are they
right,
wearing?
yeah.
Who are they? Where do they come from? If you want to go down that sort of lens, or if it's like, how are they fighting? Like, when it's down to that, like life or death fight, one-on-one, that is the world. That is the outside yourself, which you can describe.
Yeah, to look at it like, the way I see these things is as somebody that's crafting this story. And I know that everybody doesn't see it that way, but I say that because what that means is, in my opinion, what I see in TV shows is everybody is like, they're saying the reason the things that are happening are happening. They're not questioning why. They're saying like, somebody, sometimes if you think that character wouldn't do that, the first thing those characters will do on screen is go, oh, I didn't think you'd come. Oh, well, I had to because X, Y, and Z. they come up with a reason, right? I remember when Tim and I started, first started making stuff, we wanted to write an adventure. One of our biggest concerns was, well, what if the players, in the tavern decide they want to go separate ways? What do we do? You know what I mean? And, that's a non-issue. We now know, it's funny kind of looking back that far. Oh. That was a world before Session Zeros, if you can imagine that. I'm sure some people were doing it, right? But certainly before my understanding of that concept. I say that because your players have to have buy-in. But, to me, there's a level where you're going, no, I've turned the whole thing around. I'm not just going to try to make it work. I'm going to say everything that happens has a reason because we're telling a story. And it's not like a crazy existentialist nightmare. We want it to be a story. That's what I want,
Something that I would say from my own experience is that and this is only one parameter of what you mentioned, so...
Yeah.
I would potentially limit it, I would limit it to one concept. So what I mean is, I wouldn't do 3 separate things. Because if you asked me to do that as a player, that might break my brain. If you said, tell me your motivation, tell me this, and tell me this while you're swinging the axe. If you gave me one of them and you said, or I maybe 2, whereas how are you feeling and what are your senses doing? I could manage.
And that's fair. Think of it this way instead. I'm telling you how you have to tell me. And really, I do agree, it can be difficult, but it's like a game in itself. Because you're right, but you're okay, what I want you to think is, that's intended, I guess is what I'm saying. What I want you to think is, how do I give the impression, oh, well, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about how I'm not going fast enough, so I want to relate the dripping of the water to the ticking of a clock. Right? And again, if you think about it, in my opinion, that's a really cool way to write cool characters and as a thing outside of role-playing games. So I agree with you that it's difficult, but I guess what I'm saying is if you guys can pull this off, people will wonder how you're doing it,
No, that's fair. And again, and I'll just tennis one more back at you.
Yeah.
That the clock and the water dripping is cool enough to be on its own and not get muddled up by another thing that maybe won't be as cool because I'm trying to do 3 at once.
But here's the thing.
I get what you're saying.
What you usually
as a player, I don't really like that.
But what you usually get, what I've done, and that's where I get you, and that's where I think it does exactly what I want it to do, even though it does what it doesn't seem like you do. But the reason I say that is because what I'm combating is people that say 27 sentences. I'm not exaggerating.
You could still keep me to 3 sentences.
I know, and that is the more advanced, and that's fair. But that's what I'm saying. The concept in this case is because if you remember my example, I'm sneaking through the sewer. Basically, what I'm saying is, how are you sneaking through the sewer? Well, I could talk about how I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Well, what if I took a theme of the world and incorporated it, So I agree with you. It is it's effectively an advanced technique where if you wanted to do one, maybe that's how you start out. You know what I mean? Because I do see what you mean. I like the idea of the beauty you get from I smell something. It's basically it's a paragraph from a book. I smell something. I feel this, and I'm seeing this, and I look around the corner, and there are goblins. What are they doing? It's
Sure. Yeah.
It is absolutely me trying to go, no. I've stripped it all away. People will probably do something in between. But the goal, the pinnacle, is this,
Well, and then two things that I want to bring up that I want to make sure that I understand.
Yeah.
You did say this might be a tool for beginners? Did I hear that right?
Yes, the idea would be this would come along, that's a very good question. It would come along with the concept of saying, hey, are you worried you're not going to be able to, say, you don't know what you want to say when it's your turn to describe something in a role-playing game? This is for you.
Perfect.
And what you said, though, made me realize there would need to be degrees of it. Because a beginner couldn't start this low. But that's why the question is good, because it brings us there, yeah. But
because I believe that Kiel or I could probably do that.
Exactly, it's the pinnacle.
Hundreds of hours of RPGs, yeah. But
it's the skill ceiling. That's what you're,
The other thing that could be really challenging, and again, I know that's what you're going for. Now that I know that's what you're going for, I'm just mentioning 3 different core concepts in 3 sentences is really challenging. So I just want you to think about people caveating or run-on sentencing, and will the language get weird? I misunderstand what you mean.
Again, and that's why this is the part that it's so hard to give to people. It's not rules. You're allowed in this role-playing game that you're playing in to say 27 sentences. You have just decided to take on the charge to say this way. You know what I mean? It's almost like I play Dark Souls because I want to feel what other people feel. Yeah. But I put myself through that. So I see what you mean, but it's like, it's so opt-in that, yeah, it may not be for everybody, in a sense, is sort of what you're describing. Because I'm like, I would love to try it. 3 concepts might be too much, but in everything I've seen or, like, tried, I love how much it shoves into one, like, little nugget. And I almost can't believe it.
Opt-in is a key term there, I think, that you used. And if I may, I think I can sort of see where you're both coming from. How this discussion's going. Like, I think, and this might be my misunderstanding, but the way I kind of see it is, because I think the lens that you're looking at this through, Tim, is like, in this example, like the GM saying, all right, tell me this and this and this, where I think if the player is using it as the prompts for themselves, then maybe if they're confident to do it that way, then they might. But that's how I sort of would see it. It's like when used as a player aid, you can kind of, maybe you got 3 concise sentences, each sentence with a different, the different sort of concept. But when it's the GMs specifically giving you a question from the prompts, generally I would think that would be like 1.
Exactly. Or, who I would give the 3 to? A Marquise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, constraining someone like him is like, I want the ability as a GM to, within the moment, hand you a template and go, no, give me this about how you do that. I'll tell you when to give me 27 sentences. Buddy. Yeah. Exactly, right? And I'm like, in a sense, it's just given sort of another lever to pull. And so I do absolutely see where you're coming from, Tim. That's the main thing where it's like, it's difficult to give that impression because you're right. I need a way to describe to people, hey, use one of these and your friends will think you're magic. You know what I mean? It's the guy that got the magic set and like practiced it. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So something that I've been, so we were talking about moves before, right? From Powered by the Apocalypse games, where they have a narrative trigger and then they have a mechanical impact. So, +2 momentum or roll the dice and then feed the result back into the narrative. So the narrative in Powered by the Apocalypse games is like the primary medium, if you want. Like,
yeah.
So that's where it's a narrative trigger. Like my character narratively is doing this, and then, well, you talked about Sojourn before in Iron Sworn. I think the trigger there is like when you spend, an hour or more amongst a community, resupplying or whatever the narrative trigger is, but that's the specific narrative trigger. For a while now, the concept of that really appeals to me, applying that in the meta, you know what I mean? Like either in real life or as a player. So it's moves that are triggered by me as a player needing to do stuff, So it's like, for this
I think I see what you mean,
when you can't think of something to say, do this, you know what I mean? That's the...
Yes.
It's not narrative trigger, but it's a real life trigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just some predetermined, pre-written thing to just give you. It's plot hooks when you're playing a role-playing game. It's exactly that concept, Kiel. Yeah, it's like, that's what I want, is we have all this stuff. Like, okay, and this is a rhetorical question, but it's the one I think gives you the best ideas. What do you call the X card? Right? I don't think that's only good for role-playing games. It could easily be called like a role-playing game supplement, right? It's a thing that many people use in that way. But it's not a game, but it has rules, and you all have to agree to it. It's kind of like a social contract, but you know what I mean? Like, we call so many things rules that it's almost like, well, I wish there were a few more words. I guess eventually someone comes up with those words, right?
Safety tool. Yeah.
But safety tool, right? But okay, so what I called this was... But so a tool
around it, if you don't want to say rules, like.
but exactly, that's what I mean. Like, in a sense, it's not game rules, but it is. I don't know. So yes, but that idea that like the safety tool occupies, if you think about it that way, there's role playing games and there's like board games, and in my opinion, there's like this little circle that's safety tools, but then there's all these other uncovered circles where I'm like, well, and like we've done some of this, right? Campaign Master 1 is on sale right now. Very amazing book for creating the world. It's like meta stuff to make what you're making. It's this inspiration and everything. It's exactly that. It's just like, it's tools, but that word hasn't caught on as the thing yet, but that's what it is. It's just like people want to sit there and write their backstory for their character, you know, for 10 pages before they play in your game because they're just so excited. It's almost like I want to give those people a little something more to go, oh, this is my, and I say that, you know, like, this is my little imagine it better, like lens identity, and this is, you know, we're using the separate thing where we have like a bond to each other, right? You can like pull in these different parts that there aren't rules on the narrative of 5th edition. So I can be brothers with you because of some outside supplement that we've pulled in. But we just did it as characters. It's not part of the game, you know? It's like, it's our bonds, a safety tool. I don't know. But you were going to say something, Kiel. It looked like you had an idea, or
yeah,
maybe I lost it. I talked too much.
Yeah.
Sorry. If you didn't, that's okay. I talked a lot after that.
No, I did. I'm just trying to remember what it was. It was about before you got to bonds.
But we talked about safety tools and how these things are called tools, and they're just like fallbacks.
Oh, sorry, I lost it.
No, that's okay, because I'm that way all the time, and I'm like, I saw it, and I talked what I thought was pretty sure. I'm like, he lost it by now. I just wanted to get that out, but it was too much.
No, yeah, all good. There's some awesome stuff in the chat here.
Oh, yeah, I'm really
Cole
bad.
was,
Guys. I'm sorry.
Cole was asking, so is this sort of the idea of the traits and bonds and flaws from 5e? So I kind of see it as, this wouldn't replace them necessarily. This would be a way for you to, during play, like, draw from those, basically, right? Like, you come up with those at character creation, and then that's part of your character's identity and persona and, you know, the way they think and feel and behave. Then these prompts would be, you know, specific short parameters, right? Tight parameters, like what is your character thinking or doing or feeling in this particular situation right now? So, and then to come up with the answer to that, you draw on what you know about your character, which will include your, you know, the bonds and flaws and ideals. So yeah, that's my thought on it anyway.
I almost see those too. Those would be the different lenses.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
and that's what they
that's
sort of
the
pitch
thing
them as. Yeah, they try to have you like actually
I
use
love
it.
the idea that, yeah, that this, you know, as a tool, or like a supplement, like we lean into the lenses side of things, you know what I mean? And if we do go toward that, like, sort of move-based rules that I was talking about, in terms of when you can't, or when you need to think of something to say, or whatever the sort of real life trigger is, then, you know, leaning into that analogy of it's a lens, you know what I mean? So maybe.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is based around the lenses. I think like I have been wondering how to impress that concept upon people sort of in a package, and I feel like this might be it, because this is really, it's all lenses. It's ways to generate different lenses. Some lenses to help you create a description, you know, and some to yeah. I saw it that time. I stopped to go. Yeah. Oh yeah. Take your time, but just making sure. Yeah, you're good.
No. So the thought that I just had was like, you know, it ties back to identity. Like,
yes.
We all have many lenses, right? Like, I am a brother, a son, a husband,
I was just gonna say that, you son of a bee.
Yeah.
I was waiting. I was like, when he's done, I'm gonna blow James's mind.
So, and it's interesting because
that merchant, you know, they're a merchant, and through that lens, they are always looking at the value of things. But maybe they used to be a soldier. They also sometimes look at the tactical advantage, you know, positioning of things. And they're also, yeah, you know, like a brother, and they have a bond with someone else in the party who's also in this bar fight or whatever. Yeah, I think that's the way to approach it.
And I think the way that I explain lenses to people is that exact example, Kiel, and I use a family function. So what I say is, hey, when I go to James's house for lunch, in the same room, I am a father, a husband, a son, a brother, a cousin, and a nephew.
And your lenses are telescoped all the way out here.
Yeah.
Like
and that's a very complex, so I don't always go that deep. Sometimes I'll say, hey, you know, in the same, if I wanted to scale it way back, I'd say at any point when I'm with my core family, I am myself, I'm a husband, and I'm a father. All at once. And depending, like you say, is if my daughter is nearing the street, add lens.
Yeah, right. That's the one coming
You know
out.
what I mean? And if I see that, you know, it's, I don't know, let's say my wife said she was going to start dinner at 6 o'clock and I'm kind of hungry already and it's 6:15 and I see that the kitchen is cold and the lights are off, husband lens, you know, or if I see that there's something that, wow, I'm going to pick up this clothing and put it in the hamper because I want to make sure my wife doesn't get upset with me.
Yeah, and
that
there's
Tim lens, you know, which is like, you know, oh, hey, that's something cool that I don't want to watch with my wife or daughter. They'd hate it, but I'd love it. Add it to watch later.
So see it, yeah.
And that's the important thing. Sorry, just last thought on this.
No, I was going to make a really stupid joke. Go ahead, please.
That's the important thing, is that like you're always all of those things, you know what I mean? Like this is obviously going more into identity and the philosophy of that, which sort of is not strictly compatible with the lens analogy, I suppose, but or maybe it is, because those lenses are always there. It's just a matter of which one you're applying at the time, you know?
Yeah.
You've still got that cousin lens on the side. You've still got the boss lens from work, you know?
And to put that another way, sometimes the cousin lens comes out when you're empathizing with someone who you know is a cousin. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
It's not only like, it's like you were those things all the time, but those lenses like come up for various reasons. But that's what it is.
If a kid was in danger, if another child was in danger in the game, if my character was a father, that would impact the decisions that I make as a character.
Exactly. And so this, I'm realizing, and like, I don't know. So basically what I'm realizing is there's like a set of tools for these few things that I'd like to do. And one of them is your identity. One of them is your bonds. Even though it's a D&D keyword, I'm using it because it's the best word for it. And then one of them is, I guess I can't call it traits. But the idea is everything we talked about today, everything we're talking about is lenses, right? And that's why we had this conversation, because I didn't know how to explain this to somebody, and you guys have made me realize, like, oh yeah, the point is to give this to somebody, I need to show them what lenses are, you know, give all these good examples you guys have used and everything we've talked about, and say, okay, now use these things as lenses. And we have a few separate things. We have one that's a tool that helps you describe things better. Because that's the other thing I wanted to say. If I was giving it to somebody, I would give them a template, but they could overwrite it, right? That would be the rule in that case, where it's like, if I give you one, it's not rules that you have to do it. If you had something in mind, it's like, and again, you would agree on that beforehand. It's like, it's as like stress-free as possible. At least it's designed that way. But the point is, now you have the lenses, but then that's, you mentioned that, Kiel, you were like, oh, I don't know if it would work with the identities, but my concept, what I call an identity and what would be a part of this tool, is everybody fills out the same table, is what I call it. Because based on what is on the table, that's what's important about the world. You know what I mean? If it's there, if how much money you have is on this table, then it matters. You can now compare you relative to everybody else in the world, because everybody has that value. It's like stats, but because we're not comparing numbers, we're using our brains to compute, right? The reason we are playing a tabletop role-playing game to some degree is because if I look at my character and I say that they're very brash and stubborn, right? That's on one of these tools. I just have that as part of my character. I need to look at things through that lens. Is there another person that I really don't like? In a lot of TV shows, especially some comedies that I love, the whole loop is that something happens, and then people talk about it, and then you kind of pull the room for reactions, right? How would this person react? How would this person react? It's kind of the same in role-playing games. You are constantly seeing things and experiencing things and going, how would this person react? The thing is, while we have a very good idea of who that person is, I'm realizing now that what I'm describing is a character sheet, I hate to even use that word, for your actual character.
We have got to, as a person.
Yes, as a person, but like in a sense, it's more indicative of what your character is than what we call a character sheet, and that to me is the comedy. No. But yes, this person sheet, right?
Person sheet.
your lens
could
sheet.
Be humorous if you
I do really like. I like get where we got there. Yeah.
Person sheet, but two things.
Person sheet.
The first thing is, I highly recommend that these are. You mentioned tables. I think they should definitely be roll tables also, because a player like Barker thrives off of taking the random thing and making it work.
Well, and here's the thing. What you have, you're right. I don't know if you're in the doc. There you have the example identity. I have the point is the tables, the things that fill in the tables are roll tables and unto themselves. So this is occupation. So the point is, like, yes, there's a roll table of all the occupations that you could have in this world, and or you just put your, you know what I mean. So
right.
yes, like there are roll tables involved.
But I mean, on your person sheet, there should also be numbers.
Oh, I see. Yes. Oh, okay. I see. Like as like
Barker loves going. Oh, what lens am I using right now?
Yeah.
Exactly. I see what you mean
and
there.
then
like
roll
that's
on it to say, okay,
just as a
why
cool
am I
thing
thinking
of the,
like a soldier right now?
Mm.
That's
exactly
the fun part for some players.
And I see what you mean. In that way, constraining yourself by one of the values, in this case, the lens.
Exactly.
But you could say, okay, I'm rolling. Oh, for some reason, I'm acting selfish in this scene.
Yes.
Right? All problems are solvable. What do I have to be selfish about? Let's find out more about my character and solve it.
Yeah. And I think,
so yes, I love that. That's amazing.
And as a add-on to that, I think that you could lean into. There is nothing against. I don't think. Lean into. You could also make a version of this for 5e. That is a tool that specifically helps people play their traits, flans.
Yeah,
you know.
That's a good point. Yes,
I said traits and flans, and that
traits,
is never.
flans.
I'm gonna call them that forever.
Traits, leches, and flans, baby.
Cole mentioned that, and I just wanted to really emphasize that's so true. Most people create those at character creation and then never look at them again.
Exactly.
And then the second thing I wanted to do. This is a huge can, and it's full of worms. And I'm only going to put this, because this could be a stream by itself. The difference between, we're talking about rules. I'm just going to open it a little bit. I think, and this could be accepted, and this is how people already do it. I don't know. I think you could easily just call what you're making guidelines. Rules are things you have to do. Guidelines are things that you can choose to do. They're suggested.
And here's what's funny. I don't mind calling them guidelines, but the distinction I want to make, not even to your suggestion, but just in general, the reason I feel that the distinction is required to be there is because it's still important that people follow them like rules if they're following them. They're opt-in rules. You know what I mean? It's almost a misnomer to call them guidelines because it's like, I don't want, for some reason, when we play games, people follow rules. I suppose occasionally people cheat, but I would hate to do the disservice of giving people the power to think, oh, I don't need to follow that, it's a guideline. No, it's a rule, but it's an opt-in rule, and there's like a word for that. Yeah, tell me.
So, not as you've described it, because you've said multiple times that I can do it however I want.
Exactly.
And it's just a suggestion.
Yes.
Meaning, I could look at the sheet, and it, as I understand it now, I could look at, and I don't know what you're making specifically.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong. But as we've discussed it, I could take one thing from the sheet and use it, and that's what makes it a guideline and not a rule, is because I can use it any way that I want, as I understand it.
Let's use a different example. The X card. Right? That's one of these things where I'm saying it's an opt-in. It has to be, but it has to be. No. You're right, because what you're describing is like, no, you can use this person sheet is like a tool to describe stuff. There's not
the X card is
with
rules, in my opinion. Those are rules.
But
because
that's the thing. They're not
social rules.
Yes. Right there again, but that's what I'm saying. They're separate. There is something different about them, and that's why I feel like I don't know what the name is, because they are rules.
Because the X card is its own singular thing.
The thing I'm talking about fits in the category of X card. Right? So I'm saying like that's whether or not this fits into that is a totally separate conversation, but the thing I'm describing
we're talking about now,
because you're right, this
will fit into that.
Well, and more like what Kiel said. Okay, and this is like this is the can of worms distinction. This is like this is going to sound weird. But in a sense, what Kiel said was like, I've decided, nobody else has said on this, I've decided that when this happens, I'm going to do this. For example, every time somebody says a specific word, I'm going to say this phrase. That's a rule that I've imposed upon myself. The distinction I'm making is, in my opinion, I consider that a rule. Because the best situations where that will happen is in the time that I want to do it the least. Like in this, to give the parallel to the X card, the time I want to use it the least is probably the time I need to use it the most. It has to be a rule. We all have to agree that it has the same power. So I totally see what you mean, but I'm like over here with this other weird distinction. Yeah, like.
So I'll let Kiel talk because I've said a lot, but I mentioned one thing to cap that off then. This is something, the thing you're looking to design is a rule, because it will be to create character moments that have a through line. You're narratively having the rule that Jim and Pam don't get in trouble because it's important for the story. So that's why you're calling them rules, because
exactly.
You're going to decide that whenever something expensive gets broken, you always try to replace it. That's the thing.
Yes,
you will
okay.
always try to do it.
And you saying it that way makes me realize, like, oh, that's maybe a better way to give it to show people, because I'm like, I don't know how to impress this upon people, and I have a whale of a time. But yes, like that's a much better way to put it. That's what I mean when I say rule.
Yeah, no, so and I get that.
Yeah, that's great, that that example there. So, and I think this is what you were getting at. But if we're using that merchant example, right? Like the lens is, you know, always thinking about the monetary value of things. And then if I'm imagining, you know, this lens sheet, this person sheet.
Person sheet, right? Yeah.
Like, and I'm thinking, you know, you maybe have 6, so then you can do a D6 roll for the randomization if you want, and any more than 7 choices just breaks our human brains, right?
Oh,
so like
yeah,
probably
right,
6 is good. And then that's, you know, up to 6 basically if you want to only have 1 lens for if you're doing a one shot, you know, cool. But either way, and they're the same sort of layout format, but you sort of have the like high level of what the lens is about. So always thinking about the monetary value of things, and then just using that example that you said there, a specific behavioral trigger. Like this is like, you could maybe, if you're doing the 5e thing, like draw on your floor here, or because often those floors in 5e are a bit like that, right? It's like, I always do this and it can get me in trouble, or, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
So that is where under the you know, merchant lens, you can have that specific trigger where yeah, whenever something breaks that I care about, I'll always try to replace it, you know, like that's preloaded in there maybe. As one specific thing. You can always, there's still a lot of room for movement inside that lens, but there's also down the bottom this one specific thing that if nothing else comes up. And for me as well, and I don't want to say good GMs versus poor GMs, but I as a player would love if my GM had access to my sheet and saw those things and works to make sure something I care about got broken. You know what I mean? Like it's,
exactly.
It feeds into the whole.
And that's so often why I liken it to narrative and like writing stories, because exactly, if I have a list of all the things that are about you, the things that make up your identity, and I just like pull from those constantly, we talk about that as GMs all the time, you know, our players will give us what we need. In a sense, it just creates like this cycle. And to get further into that like sort of can of worms, that's the interesting thing. Like this is like almost a sub game you would play within another game, where my goal as a GM now in this separate game is to look at your things and sort of bring them up and use them against you and use them as themes in the story, because that's going to make you feel like it's a little more real, and then you get to grab onto those and stuff. But we're playing D&D 5th edition. So again, this is like a tool, you know, is like a word with, you know, a tool with guidelines is like kind of what we're doing.
I was going to say before, yeah.
Oh, yeah, just tool, because like, yeah, I don't know, like we talked about, you mentioned the safety tool and stuff, but yeah.
I love that too, because that also, again, the randomization of that can be really fun. I've learned with Ironsworn, because if you ask the Oracle, or if, you know, I played it in.
I need to knock something next.
A
cat's gonna jump on me or something.
We'll roll the D3 to see who knocks something next.
We're falling apart. No, but I call it the Crucible, not the Oracle. But the thing that's really fun about that is that in that there's a list of themes or words. It's just words, and then you engineer why. So if it's like loss, and then the other one is like damaged, you figure out, oh, something was damaged, so it was lost. So knowing that my 6 buttons are right there, and then rolling to say, oh, what button am I going to push? That is also fun in Ironsworn, because a lot of it is the Oracle and the game, and it's not Tim, the game master, saying, yep, I'm going to break your sword. It's the fiction has gotten to the point where you need to decide something that breaks, and it wasn't the game master. And so I like that, because in the sewer, okay, hey, I could even call for a roll. Hey, roll on your lenses. Let's see who you are right now.
And exactly, and that's like a decision where if everybody's using it, you get those powers. If you're just the only one using a person sheet, you can use... But exactly, it's like opt-in rules, you know? If 2 people are using it, you can go, oh, which lens did you do, you know? So yeah, I love that. So Cole did say a few things in the chat too, as you mentioned, that they, you know, people come up with these things and never use them again. She said, I think maybe this is using the 5e tools the way they were designed. Those blew my mind when I realized, and it was like they uncovered a little tiny spot when I learned about that in 5th edition, when they said, you now have these things, and this was like brand new to me. I didn't know anything about fate or anything. You now have these things that are a part of your mechanics that decide something about your character. And that blew my ever-loving mind. I was just like, holy cow, I can be a person that does this all the time? Like, and it's such a tiny, tiny little thing, like they patched it on there almost. But it's one of the most powerful things that I had seen. The most important thing you said, Tim, and you were describing Ironsworn, which is very good about things like this. But what I loved is you said you could roll to see what you're doing. And then what I would append to that is, and it wouldn't have anything to do with the mechanics of the game. Because there's this other thing that happens where when players play a game, they go, oh, I have a sword. What can I hit with my sword? What we're saying is, oh, you have a father issue. What are you going to do about it? You have, you know, you're an alcoholic. You talk too much when you're nervous. What are you going to do about it? All right, now try to pick that lock. Yeah, right? Don't at me. But yes, exactly.
It's like that, you know, that saying, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So we're giving you,
just like that.
You know, like Cole says in the chat, we're adding, instead of just a hammer, you also have a Swiss Army knife of lenses.
Yes,
you know?
and so
then the problems start looking like different things, you know, and you use,
Cole. Oh yeah, go before you forget.
Before I forget, because I probably will otherwise. I want to. And I said I would, Tim, with your Dragon Grin Ironsworn thing. I'm keen to give you some thoughts on that. So I would love to catch up about that sometime, because if you wanted to either do a stream or something like that, because I haven't made time yet to go through and do it, but I have some ideas. So anyway, just wanted to say that before I forget.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm not going to hijack this stream, but I will definitely take you up on that. Absolutely. And Cole had a good comment that I didn't get a chance to reply to also, that would add to the discussion.
Awesome,
yeah. But I was going to say, Cole mentioned that I thought that James's thing was more amorphous than an X card. And you are right. That was part of where Tim and I's misunderstanding came in a little bit. What I was describing to be rules was not what we were talking about, and that's where kind of it happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
so yes, yeah.
I was just going to say, that is a danger of, and I want to come up with a name for that. I think if identifying this situation, the danger of when you're designing games, it's verbally through a stream, it's all nebulous. Even when you write things down, because it's brainstorming. And when you're brainstorming with multiple people about things that have to be rules, it's different than narrative. So I can look at a narrative sheet and go, oh yeah, those don't work, but I don't know which one of the rules you like or don't like.
Exactly.
So there has to be some sort of, I don't know. I'm always about processes and names of things so that you can easily identify.
And I have a whole thing on that. It's called Imagine Conversations Better. And I believe what you are describing is what I call a context dissonance misunderstanding. We are both saying the same word, but it very clearly means something different to both of us, and that's where the root of our misunderstanding came from. But I can't agree with you enough that naming those things, especially misunderstandings, I try to do that all the time, is what when Cassie and I have one, I go, okay, what happened there? Let's talk about it. You know, I realize I was focusing too much on one word she was saying. I did that with my boss the other day. She asked me a question in a really weird way, and I was just like, she just sent me and I was like, oh, were you just trying to tell me to make sure that was going to work? Like, hey, make sure everything's working, test it. But she was like, hey, Jonathan wanted to make sure you tested this. And I was just like, my brain couldn't handle it. I didn't understand what she was trying to give me.
Yeah.
I am very much a logic computer like that, and I'll get caught on the wrong word. And so, exactly, I've learned that as well, James, where I'm like, no, that word means a thing. And I understand later that they didn't mean it to mean that thing, or my understanding of that word was different in that context.
But it's usually like in that moment, you need to figure it out. And usually, like, what's funny, I think the tool, to go off on a little bit, first I wanted to see how you guys are on time. I didn't really plan something.
I am good.
I'm good for another half an hour.
Okay, yeah, I was going to probably go till 8,
until
and then we'll start wrapping
yeah.
up, and then, that'll be 10 more minutes, whatever, and so, yeah. Just, if it gets close or anything, either of you let me know, but otherwise we'll do that. That's fine. We just didn't talk about it before. Cole says, I had a boss where you had to avoid using certain phrases because it would grab the phrase and run with it. That type of thing, we talked earlier in a stream, Tim and I, about like finding people to work with, finding people you can collaborate with, and there are things like that it's not that there's anything wrong with that person, directly. It's that it's dangerous to work with people like that because it's more taxing than it's worth. So really to distill that into something usable, if people don't like working with you, consider why that might be, right? It's not always you. But in a sense, sometimes I think people don't realize. But the idea is try to be as amenable as possible. I told Kiel a story about how one of the reasons I want to do so many streams with him was because he's very open. And, that's just easier, Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, well, no, I was just going to say, I think I came up with how I would describe it, and it's maybe not perfect, but I think what I am finding is, if I ask you a question, I'll say, Kiel, is this cement wet or hard? Basically, how malleable is this concept to you? Like, is this wet cement or is this dry? Because that is where I find the most misunderstandings. I focused like a logic computer on, you said that this was for beginners, and then later there was a logic error because it sounded difficult for beginners. So I'm like, boop, boop, boop. So sometimes I'll focus on that so hard, and it will be like, well, I might have mentioned it was for beginners, but I don't even remember that.
And so you did something good, because I do want to talk about the concrete thing, but what solves that problem to me is when you asked questions. You asked a question, you said, didn't you say this was for beginners?
Oh, I've learned.
Well, and that's the thing. It immediately, it's like if you start, but this is tip for everybody. That's the biggest thing. Yes, in game design is
whole life.
If you don't know how to tell, exactly, if you don't know how to tell somebody like, oh, there must be missing this, just ask a normative question, like just one without any like, oh, you're going to do it that way. Just say, hey, did you think about that snowstorm later? Oh my God, I wasn't thinking. I need to cover the chairs. Like whatever it is, it's so much better than going, did you forget the snowstorm? And in game design, what that looks like, So what I separately wanted to say about the concrete, though, Tim, is what you're describing is very much expectations. I'm going, hey, Tim, here's all this stuff, and I haven't set the expectation with you of like, hey, this is sacred, or this is whatever, And there's a lot to be said about that, too. Where it's like that bears a conversation,
And for me, Tim, speaking about Tim, when I'm coming up with a game or an idea, there's very little that I'm set on.
Yeah.
So it's so open that if you said, is that important to you? I'd be like, I'm not sure yet. So that's why for me, a degree of like, how wet is this cement? And Jeff Doty he said something that I'll share here as well. We've mentioned it in other Tabletop Terrors videos, but he had a really astute observation that ideas are like quickset cement. That almost like you think of a thing and then that's just how it is and it never changes. And just because you thought of that thing first, you shouldn't be afraid to break it up with a hammer and change it all around. And sometimes that helped the most with Dragon Grid, is that we started in the wrong place. That's why we couldn't get where we wanted to with the idea, is that the quick set cement needed to be broken up and we needed to start in a different place, and then we were able to get where we wanted.
It's like confirmation bias, right? Creative confirmation bias.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
The thing that you come across is what you land on.
Exactly.
And exactly. It's important, yes, to remember that it has no more power. It was just the first one. We do that with, obviously, humans with anything. It's like, well, I don't want to start buying a different milk because I got used to this one. I mean, what's the difference, right? But I'm like, it's different. If I drink it for a week, I won't remember what the old one was like.
Yeah.
But there's friction there, And I'm like, yes, imagine with creative ideas that you've labored on, that can be very difficult. So I forgot. We talked about some cool stuff. There was something I wanted to go back to. When I polled you guys for time, we talked about Cole's thing. Her comment.
We were talking about...
We're talking about lenses. Okay, yeah. I guess
I kind of steered it way in a different direction when we talked about questions, asking questions, quick dry cement. But before that, we were ending on basically how would we use this and whether it's rules or guidelines. And I think that's kind of how I remember it.
Yeah. So I guess, so that's what I'll do. We'll start recapping and we'll just talk about stuff and sort of we'll find something. I wanted to make sure we didn't leave anything sort of hanging. I'm really good at that, I think. But the main thing is, especially now talking to you guys,
that was just a funny way to put it.
Yeah, I love
it. So, and especially
basic language rather than negative. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, we're gonna make you forget.
No, and that's and
You're
that's
gonna
okay.
Leave that hanging.
The funniest part is
I never know the difference between irony, and I don't care anymore.
So, yeah, every time you bring that up, it's a bad time to talk about it, and all I want to do is talk to you about it.
No,
Isn't
that ironic?
Right? Yeah. It's not what you'd expect. No. So, I did forget what I was saying, but really it was just recap. The important thing is, this, even though to someone on the outside this may look like this wasn't the case, I had some ideas, and I had some things that I knew needed to be iterated on, but I didn't know what they needed or like. One of the hardest parts about creating is when you make something, wondering if people will understand the shape of it. And I say that in my very, very weird way, but like one way to look at it as a game designer is, well, what makes up a game? What things do I need for it to be a game? Right? And the only thing you need for it to be a game is players. But you need something. I did want to talk to you, Kiel, about, there was a golf role-playing game that I saw a while back somebody suggested, and it was $5. It's called Go Go Golf. This is the thing that brought me to, don't get excited.
Lee Carville's putting challenge, the RPG. Okay, that's fine.
Well, okay, so first of all, what's really funny is I love golf games. I guess I need to start with, so I have this idea that I can't figure out for how to make a golf role-playing game. And so somebody had one, and I bought it. And I was going to talk to Kiel about it. I was maybe going to run it. The problem is, it's very well executed, but I had a different expectation of what the concept was. It's a game where you have special clubs, and you hit golf balls at monsters. Now, the thing is, it's a golf game, and there's like a bunch of golf trappings and stuff, and it's a really, like, the art is really fun, and it's like really well done. It's very well executed. But I walked in the door looking for something different. I walked in the door expecting the Chinese food, and I was like, why are there calzones here, right? This is what I brought up originally when I was talking about Rick and Morty.
Calzones full of Chinese food.
Right?
Because it is a weird mashup.
But specifically, I was like so ready to see how they did a golf game, right? I had this idea for a while I wanted to, and it was just like so the opposite. But that doesn't make it a bad game. In the past, I would have said, I hated Go Go Golf. It was so bad. And that would be untrue because really what I was saying is, I was so ready for something else. But what they did do, they pulled off. I say that because these ideas we had, and there's just something special about discussing ideas with other people. And what it made me realize is I need to find somebody else that cares about a golf game, and I need to talk to them about what a role-playing game in golf is. My elevator pitch is that it's like Caddyshack, but you also play holes of golf. I can't think of a way in my brain to make people go, yeah, I'll sit down and play that.
Oh, man.
But I don't think that answer will come. That's the thing. I, so far, have been unable to find the answer, and I think the moment I put something like that, like I did with what we did here, the identity stuff, in front of somebody, we would immediately, it would be like, holy cow. We can talk about that.
I would play that RPG. I would want it to be, I won't get into that, but that is another stream that I would love to do. I would play that RPG
okay.
Because I don't like golf in real life, but I love golf video games.
Well, exactly, and the way it came about is I love golf video games because I like golf okay in real life, but I love golf video games, and I don't know what it is, right? So, but the important thing is I have this vision of a game where what I came up with was this idea for you to play golf. It was like a golf system, right? But I'm not trying to make a golf board game, if I'm being honest. The name of the game was Golf Hijinks, and what I would love to happen is for ridiculous things to happen, and you play golf. I don't know if you guys have seen Caddyshack, but it's like a cartoon, because sometimes, somebody blows something up, and the game-winning putt that they just missed rolls in, right? That's the situation that I'm looking for in Golf Hijinks. But I'm just not convinced that people are going to be... I'm not convinced in my method, in my implementation. I think the concept is there, right? But the implementation, I can't think of a way to make people go, yeah, I want to play a round of golf, or like play a hole of golf, and then we're going to role play. And I feel like I'm sure it's my own roadblock. That's why handing it to other people, I feel like you'd go, What? Why
It
don't you
is,
just
and I'm
make
gonna-
that game?
I want to throw it to Kiel because I'm very keen to hear his ideas on this. But the thing that I would posit to you, James, if you hired me and you said, Tim, I need you to help me, I would say, I need for you to tell me what you think golf is. I need for you to tell me when you say I love golf and I love golf games, I would say what parts, and then I would try to distill that into, I'd find hook or crook to distill it into something that felt samey.
Okay, and that's fair. So hitting that back to you as you said it, and like you said, Kiel, you can jump in too. We're just now, I don't know, we're talking about this. There's no reason not to. Whatever. The important thing is I have an idea for what I want the golf in the game to be. The part I'm having a problem with is what types of situations, in role-playing games and fantasy games, we have like going into dungeons and like fighting monsters and the evil baron and all this. What types of situations could surround playing golf, right? Basically what I'm looking for is, I don't know what my theme is. Golf can be, as this Go-Go Golf game has proven, ridiculous where you're fighting monsters. I do want it to be, you have to hit it, everybody has to wait for you, right? Basically, Tim, the things that are important to me about golf. Everybody waits their turn. There's certain clothes you have to wear. Not what we're used to, right? But there are certain clothes you have to wear. That's part of this game.
I did not.
Like clubs have like dress codes, basically, So the idea is like, so when you say what's important to me about
country
golf,
clubs. I'm
country
like,
clubs.
what are you talking about?
The golf clubs have
In the
dress
club,
codes?
Tim. What did you? Tim, golf is an
Next
acronym for
time.
going out late fun. I don't know. That was the thing. I'm like, wait. Did you think when I said go golf, I meant a game where you hit the ball with the snow? I know I said that, but that's not what I meant at all.
Late fun.
But no. But you're right. Like right. And even just that, the first volley was, hey, and even though I know this tip, I needed to hear it. Hey, what's important to you? What do you want to say about the game of golf? And then we'll find a way to make the rest happen. Because I want there to be some narrative ridiculousness, and I want there to be rivalries. I want there to be bets. Like, I love the idea of betting on the holes. That's what they do in Caddyshack. There's a huge bet on the line, right? I can just think of now a lot more situations that could happen on a golf course, but in the same respect, I'm still having trouble finding like the spectrum I want to land on, where I'm like, are they on a golf course, or is this some alternate reality where they are hitting a ball into a hole, but it's something that I can't even conceive of. I'm just not, I don't know, I can't pin anything down.
I have some
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah.
We can definitely make this happen.
Well, you've got 10 minutes now.
Yeah, so I'm imagining it as like the game. It is like, so I don't know if wacky is. I'm getting
Wacky is
right?
a good word.
Yeah.
Wacky is a
So it's
good.
like,
Yes.
so it's a wacky tournament, right? Like the game is about a tournament, like
Yeah.
in Dragon Ball Z, it's like the World Fighting Championship, or in real life with golf, there's obviously like whatever. But if we put in a dash of Rick and Morty, it's like an interdimensional tournament or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so then there's the framing, the premise where you can have explosions, you can have wacky stuff happening. And that's sort of part of it, right? In terms of how you can make that happen, like where you mentioned before, like they miss the putt, but then an explosion happens, and unrelated explosion, but then it knocks the thing in. So I'm imagining that kind of stuff could be Spire-like narrative abilities.
Oh,
where it's
okay,
like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Because the golf system is a little bit about like trying to roll within a number and having things you can add and subtract, So yes, that idea where that would be like the kind of thing to just get you over the top of the mechanics, Absolutely, I love that.
Yeah. So that's my idea for that. And yeah, all that stuff that you listed, that, like even leading into the attire, like the clothing you have to wear, like that obviously would be part of character creation, and you could make it so, and then that could tie into factions. You're talking about rivalries, so.
Oh yeah, and I wasn't thinking of it that strongly, but now, yeah, I'm like, suddenly like rivalries is oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's lots. Just the way you rattled that stuff off before, I'm like, yep, I could see some hooks like coming together here, and then the bets as well.
Yeah.
That could obviously be also part of the impact players can have on the outcome of a roll. You know what I mean? Just like
Yes,
an explosion
yeah.
could turn it one way or the other. A bet could, because then there's bets, there's rivalries, there's sabotage afoot. You know what I mean? Like
Yes, yeah.
So
There's stakes, things are on the line.
Yeah.
I missed everything you said, but
That's okay.
That's okay. Well, the summary, the elevator pitch is like a wacky interdimensional golfing tournament.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So and I did forget that, thinking about this idea, and Cole, thank you, you reminded me of something. She mentioned, I want this RPG to have a hole similar to Mini Putt, like the windmill and stuff, right?
Yes.
And I had this same idea, but then what I tried to do was, okay, we want to make it interesting and scale it up. And what I imagined was a style of golf where you have to get the ball in the hole, and there's like this game. But also you have to make it to where you hit your ball, right? So you have your classic style, like, role-playing game things you have to do. You know, you have to climb the thing, or you have to ride the airwaves to get up there. I don't know. But I can imagine, like, part of the fun is there are obstacles between you and getting there. And so there was a version of this game I imagined where it was like, imagine mini golf, but full size. So, like, there's not a tiny windmill. It's a whole lighthouse, you know, and you're hitting the ball. But, like, I don't know, that idea that you now the lie is in the top of the lighthouse and you have to climb up there. Like, part of the game is using your skills, you know, I don't know.
I just have an idea that probably doesn't even match, but
that's okay, because none of this really like, it's all in the pot right now. This is very, very wet cement.
So yeah,
extremely
right. Okay,
wet cement.
Good. So to kind of really lean into the interdimensional thing, I think that each, like, similar, like a Mario Kart level, how it's like there's like 2 or 3, but they're all themed like you're in Bowser's world.
Yeah.
So
I'm imagining those are like the adventures. Yeah. Like themed,
exactly.
different, like, whole sets. Absolutely.
So the way that you build holes is with little cardboard hexes.
Okay.
So you build the hole.
Nice.
And the game comes with a configuration so that you can build the course, but you can also use that world to make any kind of hole. And the hex that has, for instance, wind trap is like maybe the threat associated with that hex.
Yeah.
So you have to overcome that when you get to that part of the hole. So everyone has to do their thing to try to beat, and wind trap is probably a bad way to put it, but the weird thing that is, there's a chain chomp there. Like, if it was
exactly, those extra things. And
that
honestly,
chain chomp could be anywhere.
Yeah.
As you build the hole, and some things are fairways and some things are green, or some things are fairways, some are roughage. There's sand traps, there's traps.
And that is one thing. Part of me really wants this to be a role-playing game, and so the golf aspect took place on a roll table. And it's like, imagine, it's funny, a roll table with rows and columns, so you can now imagine we have sort of a 2D space where your ball can land, right? The important thing, though, is that's another thing I've struggled with is everybody will probably need to be looking at the same thing. And so that immediately makes it, okay, well, then you would probably make a game where you build the hole like that, you know? Because then it can randomize, you know what I mean? Like, the moment you do that, it's a different type of game, and it's not exactly what I set out to make, but in the same respect, there's not a good golf board game either, and maybe the part that I'm struggling with so much, I could remove a little more. Because Kiel, I would still use the tone ideas you had. I'm imagining factions, to me, are very analogous in the concept I'm imagining to the houses in Harry Potter. Doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's children, but just that whole all the trappings with that.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it is that, because, and I understand having that constraint of wanting it to be an RPG just because you wanted to have it.
And it is still wet. Yeah, because I'm like, that. Right. What you described sounded awesome.
But take every cool thing about an RPG that you want and then put it in a board game, and nobody ever asks questions.
And that's fair. I wanted it to be something I could play with people online, because who the heck is going to play a golf game with me? But that's why it was like a selfish constraint. But it's not a constraint there yet, you know.
With a
because
virtual
you're right.
tabletop, you could absolutely do that.
Yeah, I know.
Very simple.
That's so much work. I know.
No. It doesn't have to be.
I know, but I'm... Exactly. I do see what you mean. It is absolutely... Tim, all problems are solvable. I was just trying to get away with being lazy.
Well, no, so here's the other thing, and then I'll shut up.
Yeah, no.
The other thing is, you can also have a playable online version that doesn't use the tiles and uses a different system.
Yeah, exactly. And that's fair. Where
like, it could just be narrative.
Yeah.
Like, oh, let's roll. What is it? You know?
Do this theater of the mind for sure. Like, I can imagine you talking about the roll tables before. Like, I'd imagine there'd maybe be, again, talking about parameters. So if we're doing, the Bowser world or whatever, just to so we know what we're talking about, there'd be like a roll table for a par 3 hole and a par 4 and a par 5 hole.
Exactly.
And so the distribution of potential hazards, or things that come up. When you roll on those, like every time you make a hit, like you maybe roll on that and see where your ball lands, and pluses and bonuses, pluses and minuses could affect where it lands or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's what it. Yeah.
Instead of like having, all right, hole 1 is this and predetermined exactly what it looks like with hexes, talking theater of the mind option here, it could be like when the first player hits, where they land, that now is part of what is on the course, you know what I mean? Because no one's seen these holes before. It's all brand new for all of the actual players as well, So
and that should probably work in,
fairway, and I'm just gonna whack it and then see what
you're
happens.
describing a golf roguelike, and I'm into it. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's
precisely.
A little bit procedurally generated.
That's
exactly.
precisely what you're describing.
So you could do that.
Yeah, but
Oh, that was my who. Hold on.
Well, I love that. Absolutely, is that idea that I played with a style of the game that was theater of the mind, and again, like I totally got in my own head, because I thought, because immediately what I think is, right, I'm sort of bringing it down. Like when I'm creating alone, the reason I need other people is because I think of that idea and I go, okay, people already don't like golf, right? I'm working up this hill. Are they going to roll on a roll table to see where their golf ball landed?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
But in a sense, I'm like, the rest of it is what's bringing them there. The part that's new to them is, I'm in a sand trap? Oh, I've never done that before, right? Like, I'm looking at it through this really jaded lens, and having you guys go, that sounds cool, makes me go, oh, yeah, let me get all this dust off.
Yeah. Because to go back to, because I was also implying a roguelike as well, where that to me is this extra layer of dopamine. Because you don't know. Again, there are pre-configured holes, so that there's an easy, if you want to do a board game night and you're not trying to do all that, or you just set it up or whatever. But the idea is that it's so much more interdimensional feeling, and I love the dopamine hit, the feel of just picking up a random tile and flipping it over. Is just that's a cool feel for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, and then you can also build in an element of strategy of like, you have to place this either here or here. And you're like, well, my ability, I can definitely go through the mountains better, so I'm going to place it here.
Yeah, and like, what's funny is I'm immediately, we'll start wrapping up here. I'm absolutely in a place that we talked about being earlier when you first started, Tim, where I have had this idea of this game where I want to make a golf role-playing game. But in a sense, the things you both have described don't fit in what I'm making. And so I have a choice. I can go, well, okay, I'm going to discard those ideas and soldier on with this thing that I'm already not that confident in. Or I'm going to go, that sounds like the game I want to play. Let's work on that game, Yeah. And to me, I can always make a golf RPG still. But this specific idea, the reason I brought it up, I have a lot of ideas, but most of them are like, no, I know exactly what I want that to do. I know, they need to be tested, but I'm like, I know what I want. This was one where I was like, I really don't know. And this has been so helpful. And again, concept versus execution. Go ahead, Kiel, yeah.
So
we're not in a hurry to end. I just wanted to keep you guys updated.
That's all good.
Totally setting expectations,
So like you're saying, with this one, you kind of, the point I'm trying to say is you still have a brief, like you still have certain things that you want this game to be. And talking about that creative confirmation bias before, the ideas that we've thrown out don't have to stick with them. You know what I mean? They're in the pot, but if they're not on brief, even though your brief is still quite nebulous, like you say, it could go either way. You could let them inform the brief and sort of,
narrow it, as you said,
bring more narrower parameters, for the brief, or even that you like, still don't know any more clearly what I want, but I don't think those things fit. That's still fine. Like I reckon, like you say, every problem's solvable. I reckon, just keeping them, take them back out of the pot and set them to the side for now.
What's funny is, to me, I imagine them all being in the pot at the same time, and some people struggle with that because I'm like, no, we're now simultaneously, this can be very difficult sometimes, talking about a game where it is an RPG and it is a board game, depending on what we're talking about. but it's so easy for us to.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. That can get difficult.
The last two games that I've had ideas for, I realized while I was talking to you and Jeff about them that I am saying they're an RPG, but they would do way better as a board game.
Right? Yeah. And there's always something to be said about that.
Was the shared visual and the aesthetic and all that stuff. But the thing I wanted to mention to you was, if time wasn't a constraint, because I think that that's probably all of our largest constraints, is to like, well, why don't you design games all the time? Is that I would recommend starting your RPG, your golf RPG as you imagine it, and then also start with this board game. Start two separate things and design them separately as two separate projects, because you'll only get benefits from both. And I know that there's a time constraint thing, but the last thing I have to say, and then I have to go, but there's a Pokemon battle set you can buy. It comes with a board, and the board lays out very clearly how you put the cards down. And the difference between my daughter and I learning to play Pokemon or not was this board.
Yeah.
But
Player
you don't
aid, right?
need
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So also think you can have a golf RPG, and you also can have this add-on thing that is a separate playset.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. No, yeah.
We're talking about, are these other, the lens thing and the other tools we're talking about, are they like rules, like tools or whatever? It's a play aid. That's what it
okay,
is.
yeah, player. That's what they all exactly.
Man.
Because whether or not it's a player aid, if I am the GM and I can call out knowing you use the player aid, it still is. But to further that distinction and sort of loop back in that conversation we had earlier, the player aid contains rules. Right? They're rules for you, but it's a player aid. Those themselves aren't rules. Yeah, I like that hierarchy.
I think that is the way to do it. I hate to abruptly leave, but someone's at my door.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Works.
Jump out, ruin the stream, like the specifically the Zoom setup. We're gonna be half both in the thing. That's okay.
Oh god.
No, yeah, it's just I'm excited to see what it looks like. But yeah, no, this is yeah.
Fantastic.
Great to see you, Tim. Talk to you soon, man.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Bye.
I'm just so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to see what this does, and there we go. That's what it did.
There we go.
Not great, but I think I can do this. Oh, where are you, Kiel? There he is. He's on that side.
There we go. Hey.
People watching me do this live.
Right?
Oh, wrong one. Yeah, there we go. Guys, how do you use OBS? On the fly. That's how you do it. Yeah. I can probably hide some of this other stuff. Nope, that's ours. Okay. Yeah, so I know that I think you do have to leave soon, so we'll wrap up. The one of the major things I wanted to throw out was Cole has been in the chat, and we all talk so much, and I've been so bad about the chat. I'm really practicing, but everything you've been saying has just been so much fun. You can't wear logo shirts. You were right about golf things. You made many jokes. There's always the one jerk. You did a lot of things too. We talked earlier about like narrative rules. I love stuff like that. There's always one jerk that does this, that lies on his scorecard, or there's the one guy that is always talking about the new club he got. That's going to be the difference. He just got his new club, whatever. I also loved the Argyle Vest Gang versus the Knickerbocker Posse.
That was amazing.
That was, yeah, you pointed that one's just like, but just so many things, Cole. You've just too many apparently to bring up. But I also loved, one of my favorite was, Kiel with the damn good clarification. Take the rest of the day off. I love that because that's the thing Barker says, and I always love a good take the rest of the day off. But what was one, and this is something that made me excited to make the game. Oh man, it was somewhere, but I don't remember. But you said, I want to work on this game, even though I loathe golf, something to that effect. And then you said, I kind of want to make a golf one-page RPG. Cole, if you put rules on one page, it's a one-page RPG. So I cannot wait for that because I don't know. Yeah, definitely do that. You have it in you. I don't know what else to say. It's especially funny about golf if you loathe it, because that's an interesting perspective to view that type of game from. Yeah. So thank you, Kiel. For hanging out, for being here, for just allowing me to throw questions at you guys, talk way too much, and just see what was going on. I love this kind of chat. Hopefully the people hanging out did too, but this helps me design games,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Always love doing this. Had an absolute blast with you guys and with the folks in the chat. Cole as the MVP in the chat, as
absolutely,
as always. Yeah, no, I love this. And we came up with some really cool stuff, I think. Hopefully it helps some of your concepts that you've been working on.
Yeah, as much as I hate to admit it, sometimes you need to go to another creator and say, hey, am I crazy? And they just need to go, no, but if you go this way, it'll make more sense. And it's just like, there's no way to manufacture that. So even though we talked about a bunch of stuff, to wrap it up with like getting more ideas, that was so much fun. So yeah, I got to remember what I'm going to say this every time, and I hate it that I'm making it happen. I have to remember what order to press the buttons in. But that's it. All right. So Kiel, if you want to plug stuff, it's the end, and I don't know who's going to watch this, but you should tell people, and I should tell people about where they can find us. So Kiel, who are you, and where can we find you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm Kiel Adam. I run, write, and play a lot of role-playing games, amongst other stuff. You can find me on runwriteplay.com and patreon.com/runwriteplay and at runwriteplay on all social media. I release a bunch of little games and a magazine and do video content and all sorts of stuff. So check me out. Come and hang out.
Yes, and as you saw him here, Kiel is just one of the most fun people to hang out and talk with. He makes really cool stuff. He's getting into making physical things on his Patreon, and it's just very exciting. It's really cool to see. I mean, it's just at the end, I changed the little thing to say Run Right Play. I don't know anybody that noticed that, but I guess I should do the same. I also have a Patreon where I talk way too much about stuff like this that probably nobody really cares about, but we're making games and slowly turning people like Cole, who by their own admission are not game designers, but just are getting the bug. And that's what I'm really excited about. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. This has been very much fun. Join us tomorrow, I think, at 3 p.m. Eastern, around that time. You should be able to find the event where the four of us at AbTab are going to hang out. We're going to talk about some stuff, upcoming projects, us just chatting. If you thought this was fun, that'll be less fun, but cool. No. I felt bad immediately undercutting everything we've done here by saying, if you thought this was fun, and I just ejected. So thank you, everybody, so much. I'm going to finally stop streaming here. Have a wonderful night. Where are you going to do that? Yes, have a good one, everybody.
I'll wave and say bye.
Bye.